how would you characterize the problems of governance in local government? I'm talking specifically the non-political issues. The issues that are always going to be there, whether the ANC is involved in a particular municipality or someone else. And number two, we also want to look at solutions. Just a few solutions on what you're looking to do post May 18 to fix these long-term problems. So if you could start by setting out, in your view, what would be the 4 or 5 key areas that you would highlight as being particularly problematic for local governance?
Well, there is a review underway of the local government model as part of a review of the respective powers and functions of all 3 spheres of government: national, provincial and local. And this review is being undertaken in 2 parallel processes. The government itself, specifically the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Ministry, is working on a green paper on cooperative governance and is reviewing the white paper on local government. The ANC itself, preparing for its December 2012 conference, is also looking at reviewing the model. And to some extent, government is waiting to see what emerges at the ANC conference next December, because that will provide the guidelines or broad frameworks within which we as COGTA will take issues further and process them into policy and legislation. I mean, in any democracy, it's the majority party that guides the government of the day. And so the same will apply here. Now, because you are dealing here with an entire sphere of government, meaning local government, and because you have very vested interests in it, both within the political party and the state, and in fact the broader society, it's not going to be easy to make changes. You have to negotiate around the changes you make, especially as the model that we currently have came out of maximum consultation, the widest possible consultation you could have had between the period, in fact, 1992, parallel to CODESA, to the finalization of the white paper after having shaped the 1996 constitution, and then following from the white paper, we had the various pieces of legislation emerging. Now, it is clear that while the model is very progressive and advanced, it is perhaps too ambitious in what it seeks to do. And we need to look at how we can ensure its more effective implementation. So the first set of issues are around the model. One of the issues within this first issue is the 2-tier system of district and local municipalities. The original intentions were that district municipalities would cater for a cluster of municipalities that are joining each other with the aim of encouraging economies of scale, broader regional planning and development, assisting municipalities that are poorer by getting the better off municipalities within the district to give them some support services like offering engineers and town planners and so on. So it had a slightly redistributive element and so on. But what we found is that the model has turned out to be somewhat complex for those required to implement it, the councillors and the officials, that it has led to turf battles around powers and functions between district municipalities and local municipalities. And often there's been a blurring of roles and responsibilities. So I think that we will have to look at this 2-tier system. There are 2 proposals emerging in the discussion so far. The first is to scrap the district tier altogether and have single-tier municipalities like we have in the metros throughout the country. The second view is that we need districts, but not in all the areas outside the cities and metros. We need them in certain specific areas where there are rural municipalities. And secondly, their powers and functions should change from the current ones. So that is a debate. It's more likely, I think, that we'll opt for the latter option. have them, but in a truncated form, a different form. So that is the one area within the model that's being reviewed. The other area within the model that's being reviewed is the relationship between the administration and the councillors. The need to clarify precisely what the relationship is, because politicians and administrators cannot find themselves playing the roles that are set out for them in the law. So we obviously have to tighten those regulations and provisions in the law. The third area is that because this has always been enabling legislation as far as local government is concerned, National Parliament cannot prescribe entirely what municipalities should do, since they have got their own powers and functions enshrined in the Constitution. The legislation we've devised is enabling. It means that municipalities have some leeway, quite a lot of leeway, to shape within the national framework their options. So there's no clarity on what the precise role of the Speaker is, as distinct from the Mayor, and now we have a new concept of the Chief Whip in a party. So we need to clarify roles. The third area is on community participation. The need to strengthen the ward committees in particular, to give them more powers and functions, to expand their role, to provide for more consultation even from the ward committees with ward communities and the like. So it's around the areas of community participation. The fourth area in the model that needs serious reconsideration is the funding system. Now, with the new model, we gave many more responsibilities to local government. Many of these new boundaries of municipalities were far more inclusive than the previous boundaries of municipalities. Larger numbers of people, but more importantly, people who are actually poor and disadvantaged. Racial integration meant that African people were brought into the same municipalities as those that previously were restricted to whites and to a certain extent Indian and colours. So now the responsibilities have increased, but the numbers to whom you have to deliver increase. And yet the model is based on a view that municipalities will raise 95% of their revenue from their own sources. That was the pre-1994 era. So we are at the moment within COCTA engaging with the National Treasury, Finance and Fiscal Commission, South African Local Government Association and other stakeholders to review the entire what we call intergovernmental fiscal review, where we are looking at how we can allocate more funding to local government while insisting that they use their limited resources more effectively and productively. It's not simply that they do not have enough resources and funding that explains their failure to deliver more effectively. So it's also that they're not using their resources effectively.
Could I just ask, the intergovernmental fiscal review is a review separate to the review of the model of
it's part of the review of the model. When you're looking at the model, you're looking at financial aspects, aspects of democracy, aspects of structure, the two-tier system, aspect of system, meaning how does the Speaker relate to the Mayor, relate to the Chief Whip. So these are the different components of reviewing the model. So when you ask me, another way of putting it for a journalist, I suppose, to put it in a much more simple and direct way for your readers, what are the problems of the model? A, the model itself. B, capacity. We don't have enough capacity. C, resources and funding.
Yeah.
D, lack of enough democracy. E, lack of active engagement by provinces and the national sphere in local government. Meaning, it is true that local government is distinct. But the same provision in that same constitution says it's distinct but interdependent and interrelated. What has not been happening, Bukhari, is we're not having the national and provincial government more actively supporting and monitoring what's happening in municipalities and assisting them to fulfill their functions. In fact, in section 154 of the Constitution, it makes it very clear that national and provincial government have to monitor and assist municipalities. Instead, what provinces often do, if a municipality is teetering or on the brink of collapse, they apply what you call a section 139 of the Constitution intervention and take over those functions. Yeah. We are saying to them, strictly speaking, that's a last resort. And if a municipality is falling apart, You as the province are co-responsible. You haven't been monitoring and you haven't been supporting. In fact, we are meaning to bring a bill to Parliament in the second half of this year that links monitoring, support and intervention. That you must monitor and support more effectively so that reduces the need to intervene. So the fifth area, or the sixth area in which there are problems, is that national and provincial government have not come to the party.
Not way.
In that, we haven't, as I said, monitored and supported municipalities. We haven't done the oversight that we are supposed to do. We are supposed to, for example, receive annual reports from the MECs on the performance of the municipalities in their provinces. These 9 reports are meant to be consolidated into a national report. That is meant to be presented to Parliament. Parliament and the provincial legislatures are meant to look at these reports and guide municipalities on what should be done so that they improve their performance. They are meant as Parliament and legislatures to go to the MECs and the National Minister and say, we've looked at these reports, we can see that there are some things that you have to do as government, please do it and we'll hold you responsible for that. So in many ways, Parliament, the provincial legislatures, national government, provincial government, we haven't done enough. It's true to say that the councillors and officials must take their measure of responsibility for the failures of local government. But as national and provincial government, we too must take responsibility. In some senses, these community protests that you see, they're not just about municipal delivery issues. They're also about issues that fall outside the strict purview of local government. They're about crime, housing, education, health, and so on, right? Those are provincial functions, really. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, those protests are a reflection not just on the inadequacies of local government, but cooperative governance as a whole, the inability of the 3 spheres to work together more effectively.
And in fact, the fact that there are these problems with these protests, and a lot of them have to do with non-municipal powers and functions, raises an issue for yourselves in the review. Are you looking at moving some functions? I'm not aware of what the specific constitutional imperatives are going to be, but I'm looking at moving some functions to local to the local level in order to help communities, because the local sphere of government is where people interact with the state, and you find that a lot of the services that they need, they actually have to look at provincial government rather than local their own municipalities, which creates obviously this.
Yeah. Well, you see, firstly, as I said, this review of the local government model is part of a review of the powers and functions of all 3 spheres.
Yeah.
And that's when I mentioned the Cooperative Governance Green Paper and the review of the White Paper. In that process, we are also looking at the issue of what powers and functions should be allocated to local government and what to the other 2 spheres. Now, we are also wanting a more integrated delivery of services at local level. So what is being suggested? Consideration must be given to giving local government more power on housing, where it has the capacity to deliver. More power in terms of transport. More power possibly in terms of health. However, we are also thinking that we should not allocate the same blanket set of powers to all municipalities because of the huge capacity differences. Right? If you look at eThekwini on the one hand and Joburg and Cape Town, and you look at your small rural municipalities, they can't both do the same. So one of the major, I think, elements of the new model we are evolving, and the model is not going to mean fundamental changes to the current model. It's going to mean changes to aspects of it, but the core principles and values of the current model will remain. Aspects of it will change. But one area in which we are thinking of change is to say these are a menu of powers and functions for local government. Some municipalities can exercise the full menu. Others will be able to exercise only 1 in every 10 power function. As they grow in strength, they'll exercise 2 and 3. So we're talking about a differentiated model. In that context, while some municipalities will have less to do, other municipalities will have more to do.
Yeah.
Like Joburg can handle housing. eThekwini is doing well with housing. In fact, as you know, the Minister of Housing, Human Settlements, has what we call accredited several municipalities that are strong enough to take greater responsibility for housing. The importance of that is that you can allow for integrated delivery where you don't have a situation where a house is there, but the municipal infrastructure, water and electricity and road is not there. So you're right. What is going to happen is there are going to be some more powers and functions allocated to local government, but not all municipalities will exercise them. And furthermore, if you're giving them more power, you have to give them both the funding and resources on the one hand and the capacity on the other. So you can't just dump on local government provincial functions and powers and then fold your arms. So it has to be accompanied by the resources, capacity and funding.
That was my next question. This movement of powers, those mandates have to be funded. What are the political, the fiscal and financial implications for the provincial sphere of government? Because a lot of these functions will be taken from the provinces.
Yes.
And that might have, I mean, given the political implications.
Yeah, no, you see, firstly, I understand what you're saying. Those systems will be technical systems that will be decided. As far as the politics goes, I think provinces have been complaining for a long time that they are unable to spend the money on actual bricks and mortar for houses because the municipalities haven't given them the infrastructure, water and electricity. So you can't just go and put a house there.
Yeah.
That was the argument by Maggie Govender in KZN. She said she couldn't spend all that money because the sites for which it's allocated in the municipalities have not got the services that the municipalities promised that they would deliver. And the municipalities say, we don't have the money, moreover, we wanted it here, and you said have it there. But if we had it here, it will be cheaper for us to provide services. So now if the municipality is going to cite the area in which the house is going to be built, it would take into consideration that it's cheaper in this area rather than another for water and electricity to be provided, right? So actually the provinces are under pressure to spend their budgets and they can't do so without greater cooperation from municipalities. So to some extent at least, they will be pleased to forego the money to the municipalities to actually use for housing. Ultimately, they'll also benefit by the number of houses that the province delivers. Second point is that there is well, I think that's the main point. As far as how, in terms of formula and systems and processes, those matters will be dealt with, I think those will be shaped over time. There's nothing like insuperable or insurmountable there. The issue simply is, are they going to feel that they are going to lose power? Are they going to feel what is the point for having a human settlements department in the provinces? Yes, in the long term that issue may arise, but given where we are at the moment, there is no chance that human settlements departments in the provinces will dissipate. Their responsibilities will remain to provide houses outside of the few municipalities that will have the capacity to take full responsibility for housing. They will be responsible maybe even for managing the flow of funds. So it doesn't go from the national fiscus directly to the municipality. It may go through the province. Thirdly, they will continue to act with the national government in respect of policy issues. So you don't find a situation where each municipality develops its own independent policy on housing simply because it's got the power now to deliver houses. There will be a broad framework within which they may make like local choices, but we have to have the same format for housing whether you're living in Shlumayo or in Soweto, you know. So the provincial department will still have a role.
Okay. Other than the resource base and the funds to effect all of this, the other stumbling block is the skills base.
Yes.
Where the skills going to come from to be able to do.
Yes. Well, the issue still remains the same, whether the responsibility is fulfilled by the province or the local government, right? Here, the Human Settlements Ministry and Department, as well as other stakeholders in this area, have been for some time now been working on ensuring that we do have the necessary skills. Now, interestingly, you know more about this maybe than I do. Post-World Cup, the impression I get from the media is that the construction industry is going through a significant decline because there are people around who are now unemployed, and there are projects that these construction and development operators have projected to be fulfilling at the moment, which isn't taking place. So my sense is that with this 810 billion rand investment of the state programs and projects, they're not getting off the ground fast enough. There was a business report piece about a few months ago where people are complaining. I remember Jardine, for example, saying, look, man, we're going into the continent because we've got staff and skills, but we haven't got any contracts, and this thing is very slow, this 810 billion rand. So I think that you may be right, I'm not sure. There are always generally skills shortages, but I think in the construction sector, it may be that that's less of a case.
No, you're speaking specifically on construction. That relates to the provision of housing.
You mean the skills within the municipalities?
Skills.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. I would imagine. No, you're right. You see, the point is that I think that the provinces should actually, when they allocate responsibilities to the local government, which they have until now been taking care of, they must give the staff that goes with it, as well as said, capacity and resources. Now, when Water Affairs transferred the projects from national to local, the problem there was they often didn't transfer the staff. For a variety of reasons, staff didn't want to move. They were, you're a labor person, labor relations issues and so on. And the municipalities also said, well, who's going to pay the staff? You're giving us the staff. So there are those sets of issues. We should avoid that in this case. Do municipalities have the capacity? Well, let's be clear. They will not be given the power until a skills assessment has been done. And then it's decided, eThekwini can do it, but Nelson Mandela Bay, perhaps not. Umsunduzi can't do it, Buffalo City maybe. So in other words, before they hand over the power, they have to do a skills audit. And they have to say, there's a gap there, we'll fill the gap for you.
And what time frames are we looking at? I mean, when can we see a new or transformed municipal?
Yes. Well, firstly, as I said, the government's got some work underway, but we are looking mainly to the December 2012 conference. Once the ANC has taken positions, it will provide a broad framework, obviously, and it will prescribe. Within that broad framework, COCTA will take responsibility, with whoever other departments relevant, to processing policies and legislation. I would imagine that from the beginning of 2013 onwards, the elements of the new model will be put into effect through policy and law. But the actual model will only, for the most part, come into effect with the next local government elections. After the ANC has given its positions and governments begun to transform them into policies for government and so on, and laws, we will, in that process, even before we do it, have to consult with the widest range of stakeholders. So there's going to be a massive consultation process. I would imagine it will be the biggest, on the biggest scale since the shaping of the Constitution in 1998. It's going to be massive consultation. My own sense is that there are going to be no major fundamental changes to the Constitution as such. There will be tinkering of the powers and functions across the spheres. And the aim is not ideological. There are people who feel that the ANC wants to truncate provincial government. They are people who argue that the ANC wants to take over local government from the national sphere. Well, you know, that's not on the agenda. There are people who feel the ANC wants to recover ground, or at least the left in the ANC wants to recover ground, lost during the negotiations between 1990 and 1996. They didn't want provinces. They gave it as a concession to the opposition. Now they want to recoup ground. Of course there are people who feel that way, and why not? That's politics. But for the most part, this is driven, this review, this overhaul of the model possibly. It's not an overhaul, it's a review of the model and a review of the three spheres of government. It is driven by the imperatives of significantly improving service delivery and development. It is a pragmatic attempt at making the state more effective and efficient. It's not driven by ideology. Strong central state, provinces are a federal aberration, and local government is where popular power resides. So have strong central state and a strong local government. The elements of that may happen as an outcome, but it's not driven a priori by some ideological perspective. It's actually saying, we've had this system now for 1996 to now. The fact is that while we've made significant progress, we are still far from adequately addressing the issues, the needs of the people. How do we accelerate service delivery? How do we improve development? Well, we have to look at the form of the state. And one of the things we're finding is that these three spheres of government, they are not working cooperatively enough. They are not working as in an integrated fashion. So, what we are saying is that we need to look at the three spheres of government. We need to look at the local government model, which is so crucial to service delivery and development, and ask how can we improve delivery and development. And in that context, we are saying, let's look at the powers and functions. So the imperatives are not ideological. They are practical, pragmatic. They're driven by service delivery challenges.
Well, if anything, I mean, these reforms will end up giving us more devolution rather than centralization, in the sense that some key functions like health, housing and all of that could end up residing in some instances in the local sphere rather than in national or provincial.
In part, I think you're right, but you know, the way I would reply is to say the outcome is likely to be a far more integrated, cooperative governance system in which we continue to have three spheres, but we have a stronger system of local government, but at the same time a far more proactive national government in particular, working with the provinces in municipal issues where municipalities are given more support, resources, capacity, funding and so on. I actually think what you're going to find is a more active intervention from, so to speak, above by the national and provincial state, and a more active intervention from below by a much more enhanced ward committee participatory system and a much more advanced community participation system. You see, the one thing about the Jacob Zuma administration people must come to terms with is that we have been far more open about the fact that the state alone cannot deliver, that we need the active participation of people out there. Notwithstanding Vicksburg and some of the excesses that have happened from the state, some of the insensitivities of municipal officials and councillors towards the community protests and the like, the fact of the matter is we really genuinely feel without more active engagement of the people in their own development, without the more active involvement of people in governance, we are simply not going to be able to deliver as fast as we'd like. So what you're going to have with a new model, really, I think, is on the one hand, more active provincial and national intervention in municipalities than ever we had before, and on the other, more active community participation from below. Now, that is what I think is pending. Of course, I can't predict what 3,000 delegates will decide in December, nor can I tell once the matter is taken into the public domain what would happen in the public hearings and the endless workshops we're going to have and so on, right? But I really think that there is no overriding centralist, commandist state notion of taking powers away. No, that would be foolhardy. We've gone beyond that debate.
Are you not worried about allocation of further resources to local government, given there are often unpleasant scraps for resources?
Yeah, we're acutely aware that if you give more funding, if you give more resources, you can actually fuel more tensions. So you can't give money unless you have capacity to manage the money. Now there are a series of programs that need to be accelerated to improve the financial management skills of and other technical management skills of municipalities, but also political oversight skills of councillors. We've got programs that bring together the Auditor General, National Treasury, Cooperative Governance Ministry, and so on. SALGA as well. And we're just not doing enough, or we're just not being effective enough. And we need to considerably accelerate that. Now, actually, you're right. We are aware that these problems could arise, and we will try as best as we can to manage them. So I think it should be incremental. It should be linked to, as you get more capacity, you get more funding. It's not something that is going to be a big bang approach, no. That will make things worse.
Lastly, DM, are we likely to see a reduction in the number or shape of municipalities? I mean, I'm aware that we moved from...
Yeah, no, I think that is on the cards. It's not going to be easy because, remember, no councillor or official is going to let you close down his or her municipality. So it's going to be a thing that has to be negotiated. It's a thing that has to be planned for and engaged around for a long time. But it is very clear that some of the municipalities do not have the economic or financial base to exist. They should never have been municipalities in the first place. We think they should be merged into adjoining municipalities. In fact, MECs have identified, I think in KZN it's many municipalities, right, almost a third, that should really be absorbed into other municipalities. The decisions around that are made by an independent demarcation board. As government, we can go to them with proposals, and so can municipalities. But ultimately, the board would use its criteria in terms of the Demarcation Act to decide on specific cases. We must stress that we don't think that by absorbing municipalities that are not functional because they don't have a financial or economic base, that you're going to solve the problems. Actually, it simply means that less poor municipality next door is now going to be burdened. So we can't look at the issue of numbers of municipalities without looking at the issues of capacity building, intergovernmental fiscal system, and so on. The many issues we spoke about earlier. This is part of the overview, of the review of the whole model. And it's an element of it. And so if you link it to the other issues discussed earlier, it might help to understand that we're not giving a simplistic answer. Absorb them in the municipality next door, problem solved. Of course not.
Ultimately, well, what's the solution for that long-term problem? Because as long as you have the levels of poverty we continue to have, particularly in our rural areas, you're never going to have a viable tax base in those municipalities. What's in your own view, the long term?
Well, it's actually, obviously, the long term is growth, economic growth, and development. The success of the new growth part, the creation of the 5 million jobs we ambitiously aiming to do, but it's not beyond us if we get our act right. It's about ensuring that all the elements of the new model are effective properly. It is about ensuring that if you have bigger municipalities, that you take the advantage they provide, not always put into practice, of economies of scale and the like. But fundamentally, it's about economic growth. We need at least 6 to 8% growth rates. And until that happens, we have this welfare system. And you know, we can't continue to give 27% of the population welfare grants. So you're familiar with the issues. In other words, this is part of a broad set of problems that are not Coctas alone to address.
Mr. Yunus Carrim,